History man, a word burger, please. Tears.
Human tears. The secretions of the lacrimal gland containing oils, salts, proteins, and stress hormones.
When Furiosa came out this May, it was ultimately compared unfavorably to Fury Road, widely seen as an absolute masterpiece in the Mad Max universe. This makes sense as Furiosa is the same character from Fury Road, although now played by Anya Taylor-Joy instead of Charlize Theron. And we're in the same locations as all these other characters, the Citadel still run by Immortan Joe and his sons, the Bullet Farm, Gastown. Some of the same actors, Josh Hellman, Nathan Jones, John Howard, Angus Simpson, are here as various characters in the Fury Road universe. One character who is a through line here that had to be recast is Immortan Joe, since Hugh Case Byrne, who also played the villain Toe Cutter in the original Mad Max, passed away in 2022. However, since Furiosa is a prequel that aims to situate Fury Road, I think a more apt film to compare it to ultimately is the original Mad Max, the 1979 dystopian George Miller film starring Mel Gibson as Max. Hatched in the wake of the OPEC crisis and oil embargo in 1973, Mad Max has always been a franchise steeped in anxiety about resource depletion and the fallout from shortages. What will happen when the oil ultimately runs out?
We are war boys! War boys! Come back crazy, war boys! War boys! Fukushima, come back crazy, war boys! Oh God! Today we're heading to Gastown! Today we're hauling aqua cola! Mother's milk!
Fury Road adds water to the mix, realizing that as we deplete our resources, the next stage of the resource wars will be clean, fresh drinking water. The original Mad Max, however, does not really tackle these themes at all. The dystopian Australia that Mel Gibson tackles is a world where lawlessness is getting the upper hand on law enforcement. It was shot an insanely low $400,000 Australian dollar budget. It was about road violence and the effect that it was having on Australian society. Max is a police officer in a society controlled by powerful biker gangs. George Miller and James Gosling, who he teamed up with for financing, were spending time around a ton of emergency medical services staff looking into incidents of road violence, even deciding to finance the film by doing 3 months of EMS work.
Good evening. The Middle East War produced developments all over the world today. The oil-producing countries of the Arab world decided to use their oil as a political weapon. They will reduce oil production by 5% a month until the Israelis withdraw from occupied territories. If the Arab countries keep that pledge, it would reduce their production by almost 50% in 1 year. There were diplomatic maneuvers at the United Nations, in Washington, and in Cairo. And there is a savage and possibly decisive tank battle raging in the Sinai Desert.
This was followed by the 1973 OPEC crisis and many incidents where people took to defending their rights to fill their gas tank. A basic thesis that people would do almost anything to keep traffic moving in a crisis informed the low-budget action film Mad Max. Of course, this was not really said or elaborated on until the second movie, Road Warrior.
The gangs took over the highways, ready to wage war for a tank of juice. And in this maelstrom of decay, ordinary men were battered and smashed.
Compare that to Furiosa, which is set in a world we already experienced in Fury Road. Rather than setting up Furiosa to be a kind of mythical Joseph Campbell-style hero road warrior, she's a person looking to get back to a green place she's lost. It's not just the story of Mad Max, where at the end of the first film he's lost his family and decides to wander the post-apocalyptic roads, killing and fighting various new groups. Furiosa seeks vengeance, but also has a wider motive that we see her try to accomplish in Fury Road. In the original Mad Max, especially due to the budget constraints, the characters living through the fall of society are far more normal, whole, unaffected. Furiosa uses this too, showing the characters we see in Fury Road, Immortan Joe, his sons, the organic mechanic. They're all far more whole, not in the stages of acute decay we'd see in Fury Road. The entire civilization, from the Citadel to Gastown to the Bullet Farm, are all not as far gone in the beginning of Furiosa as they'd be in Fury Road. And yet, putting it through war, we understand where that decay came from. Furiosa chooses to add the insane Dementis, played excellently by Chris Hemsworth, giving a wider view to the fixed civilizations we encounter in Fury Road, adding both political intrigue and a backstory to why Furiosa didn't just leave the Citadel sooner.
You have a choice. A very attractive choice. I want your leaders. I want those who hold dominance over you.
None of the stuff that the original Mad Max on a tiny budget and without a fleshed out idea could have hoped to accomplish. But since these films both cover the same time period and hope to show us the beginning of this world, it feels like George Miller, who directed both of these films, may be hoping to atone for some of the acute issues felt in the original Mad Max, helping to fill out this world, which was given a new life and aesthetic revival in Fury Road, and improving it, creating a far more immersive post-apocalyptic world. Lastly, one of the major problems that George Miller attempted to fix after the original Mad Max is the cinematography was far too static. Road Warrior attempted to fix that. Furiosa, more than any other Mad Max film, is incredibly creative and brings us along almost like a video game into the actual action sequences of the film. Finally, I should say that George Miller wanted to originally write and direct what became Fury Road, the beginning of this world, all the way back in the 1990s, but the film stuck in development hell until 1998. Cast as Furiosa was Sigourney Weaver. But the actual production, which was set to begin in the 2000s, was cut short almost immediately by 9/11 and the Iraq War. The American dollar collapsed against the Australian dollar, and it became almost impossible to budget. The film was going to shoot in the African country Namibia, which became a security concern because of the Iraq War. And then Mel Gibson had his meltdown, and George Miller felt like it would be wrong to cast him. This postponed the entire production, which picked back up for a 2015 release with Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy as Max. I say all this to talk about the actual contents of both Fury Road and Furiosa, which, like the original Mad Max films, felt incredibly inspired by current events. The Citadel and the War Boys, who were radicalized by Immortan Joe and a fundamentalist ideology, where they quite literally use suicide bombs, believing they'll be reincarnated in Valhalla, is a take on religious conflict. In Furiosa, the video game-like realistic action sequences feel like you're playing Call of Duty or a similar game, which is actually pretty surreal for an action film in my opinion.
There always was, is, and will be war. The Sumerian fought the Elamite. The Saxon fought the Viking.